Hello, I am Maba Tumunzi and this is Conscious Conversations. Conscious Conversations is a platform centered around creating a collective safe space that encourages honest human connection, helping us reframe the self-limiting ideas we hold about ourselves and our life experiences. Through these conversations, we aim to inspire deep and meaningful conversations that will grow into a community of practice that is committed to healing and expansion. Today we speak to Noentla Khumalo. Noentla Khumalo is a fashion stylist and sangoma. She has been practicing for 6 years and predominantly works as a healer and focuses on teaching people how to communicate with their ancestors, helping them integrate spiritual practices in their everyday lives. Hi Noentla, thank you so much for joining us. Please tell us about yourself.
Thank you for having me, Mabato. Noentla is a fashion stylist, sangoma. I grew up in Joburg, have lived around the city, and been practicing as a sangoma for the past 6 years.
Your journey as a sangoma, how did that start?
My journey, my calling is something that I believe that I grew up with, but I initiated at the age of 24 when life started going a bit south and having very intense experiences, searching for my identity, searching for who I was as a person and my purpose of being here on earth. It's something that I've always been curious about, why we're here, what are we doing here, and why are we here as humans? What is the experience supposed to be on a human level? When I started interrogating those questions, I think that's when my calling started to be more intense, started to come to the surface. And when that was coming to the surface, that's when I was brought into the spiritual world, per se. It wasn't something that I thought was going to happen. It wasn't something that I thought, was. And before I was having quite a mundane life, I think, and having quite a very, superficial life. And so I think becoming a sangoma was probably one of the best things that could have happened to me, in that sense. Yeah.
And have you had a sangoma in your family? Was it something known in your family? How was that like?
I remember on my mother's side, my grandfather's sister, one of his sisters, when I was very young, became a sangoma. And unfortunately was, I think, what kind of scared my family. I'm not sure if she was on the good or bad side. I'm not sure what her practices were like, but it was something that was not spoken about. And yeah, so when I became one, everyone kind of was shocked. I think it was a shock to the system, the family structure, because I grew up Catholic and very entrenched in Christianity. And, my father became a pastor when I was during my college years, decided to go to Bible school. So when I, round about the same time, started to question my own purpose, and I didn't quite take it down the same, journey as everyone else did. I think it was something that was quite uncomfortable for my family to experience, as much as it was uncomfortable for me, but it was also uncomfortable for them to accept. So yeah, I don't think the ubungoma was something that anyone thought, was a journey I was going to go down.
And is
Yeah.
this when you got into fashion? Because I imagine in your early 20s, you're probably in university.
Yeah, yeah.
It almost seems like, the creative aspect of who we are sort of like lends itself
Yeah.
to, spirituality. So it's quite interesting, to see when those connections were made.
Yeah. Actually, going into fashion was also quite a fluke. I didn't apply for college with everyone else. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I remember like driving down Greenside and was in the car with my dad, and he was yelling at me, decide what you're going to do with your life. Like, are you just going to sit around? What are you going to do? Like, and I saw a fashion school, and I was like, I just was scared to tell you, Dad. I want to go to fashion school. So even the things that I do in my life are always kind of by chance. I never really plan anything, so I kind of always lived my life off of a whim. But when I look back, I was always meant to be in fashion. My grandparents on my mom's side, they were tailors and the seamstress. Their love story was they met in Elof Street, where which Elof Street in their times was the hub of fashion. So, yeah, it's a fluke, but always meant to be.
So would you say your journey as a creative sort of inspired your spiritual growth?
Because going into fashion allowed me to be free. So it was just, I think, the next step of expressing my freedom and going down the road less traveled. So it did lend itself, because I learned a lot about myself, of who I was, by becoming and embracing my creativity. So yeah, it was just the next natural step about learning another layer of myself. Yeah.
I mean, one can say creativity, because we're creative beings, because we are of the creator. Creativity is something that comes naturally to us as human beings. I find that a lot of the time people lose their creativeness because because of how we've been socialized. Certain aspects of who we are have sort of like been suppressed. And so would you say, in your experience, in your journey, there has been a merger of your creative aspects, or aspects of yourself that are creative, and your spirituality? I mean, I know you recently collaborated with Tebe Magugu. How do you find that the creative world and your spirituality connect?
Yeah, so the existence of both of those parts of myself live within me through polarities. They are one and the same thing. They're not separate from the other. So me as a creative and me as a spiritual being are two things that exist at the same time in the same space. So for me, it's very difficult to take one thing out of the other. So that particular project with Tebe was quite a good a time when I was finally able to merge the two, and I realized that the two do not have to be separate. It was a project that, when Tebe came to me, I was quite like, oh, I wonder what he's going to talk about, what he's going to ask me to do. Like, is he going to come to me as a stylist? But when he approached me as a healer in the fashion space, was quite like a breath of fresh air, because often people think, it's either you're the healer or you're the fashion person. Not everyone would approaches that world and says you can bring the two together. So for me, when I dress people, when I bring it's, I want to bring that person out, right? I want to
In their wholeness.
in the wholeness. It's how I see you, you know, and how they see themselves. I want to bring those things together. So when the print was decided on, was, I thought, wow, this is a very good way to bring a healing tool onto the body. A healing tool. When I just thought this, when someone wears that garment, wears that dress or that shirt, they can feel a certain difference, or it can vibrate towards them in a different way, and therefore they vibrate to their higher selves when they wear the certain things. So yeah.
Some of our viewers might not be aware of that project. Can you take us a bit through that? Just tell us a bit about how that got to be, and what exactly, how you represented who you are fully in that particular project.
So that project was definitely not about me. It was about my ancestors and how they wanted to communicate. And the thing that we use as sangomas, so always try to use each moment as a teaching moment, and each project as a moment to share a new lesson. So we decided to talk about divination. When a person comes to the sangoma, how does the sangoma see? And one of the tools that people use is the bones, right? And when you have the bones, you throw them on a mat. So we just thought, how beautiful would it be to ask a question to the ancestors and express what the ancestor says. So we asked, what's next? And the bones fell, and we took a photo of that and juxtaposed it onto a fabric. And that, so I use that as a teaching moment to speak about the bones and what each bone means and how it falls and what it sits. And so that project came not only with the element of healing, but it also came with the element of teaching. And that was quite refreshing, that we could teach and also make it beautiful. Because a lot of people think that sangomas are quite,
There's
dirty, and we are not refined and quite, ancient. So it was beautiful. It's quite beautiful to now come into a stage where we can make it and put it on, international stages and talk about it globally. The awakening that's happening on the African soil. So it's about changing it and making it acceptable, and saying that this is who we are and this is how we are, and we're beautiful
just as we are.
And
I think also, taking spirit, particularly within the African context, and, creating opportunities for our identity as Africans to be seen on a global stage, and to perhaps also help spirit evolve with us, so that we can also find different ways of expressing who we are as Africans and as healers. I mean, I think that was brilliant. How do you think that other people, other young healers particularly, can use their passions? Because I strongly believe that spirit uses our personality to express itself. And I find that once people have gone through the process of initiation, they sort of like they shy away from their other talents. How to infuse what they love doing, their passions, with their healing work as sangomas, as inyanga, as prophets, and so on. How do you think we can encourage more young people to find different ways of doing what they love and using their calling to express their creativity?
So I'm going to take it back a little bit. The lives that we live are as they are. Who we are is exactly that. So I think the first step is to accept people for who they are and not shun them and tell them to be different. And also, by you going through the initiation journey, you know that spirit has always been there with you. So then your life doesn't begin with the initiation. Your life has always been there, happening, teaching. So I think it goes back to that same thing of not separating who you are from the healer self. So not separating your physical self from your spiritual self. So yeah, by how do we encourage them? We encourage them to be exactly who they are. We encourage them to accept themselves for who they are. We encourage them by saying your talents and your healing are not separate. You are not separated from what you do and who you are is not two separate things. So I think we always go, people are looking for what other people can, from the outside. But it's best
or what fits in a specific society or community. But isn't that exactly the problem? I mean, we have been brought up in a way that encourages us to do what works. People get into careers because it is what pays the bills. There isn't really, not a lot of people have got the opportunity to really do what they love. And so when one goes into a spiritual journey of becoming a sangoma, and it's not only sangomas that I think would infuse their talents into their Africanness or into traditional practices or into different forms of creativity, right? Creative arts or expression. But not everybody has got that opportunity or that freedom because of the socio-economic background we come from as black people. How do we find ways of being who we are, considering the financial or social dynamics that come with being a young black South African?
That's where the difficulty comes, where people feel it's hard to leave their lives to go pay attention to their spirituality, because life comes with a lot of responsibility. Life comes with a lot of practicalities that we cannot avoid. So focusing on your spirituality comes with a lot of sacrifice, right? Focusing on things that are not tangible comes with a lot of sacrifices too. So when you have to focus on, okay, how am I going to pay my bills? What am I going to leave? You can't question that stuff. That's where trust and surrender and knowing that you will lose, and knowing that it's going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging. It's going to make you broke and poor, and then it's going to, at one moment you're going to have, and then the other moments you're not going to have. So in order for you to go through those things and accept yourself on all levels, to know that these tangible things do not define me, these tangible things do not make me a better person. Me being a better person makes me that. Me having compassion, me having, compassion about the next person, compassion for the environment and the world that we live in, compassion so I think it starts with really thinking to yourself, what are the things that are important to me? What are the things that are going to make, what kind of legacy? That's when we start to, go deeper and deeper into what kind of life do I want to live. And if you want to live a life that you collect a lot of things and, you define yourself with what you have, but that's completely fine. And those are the walks that people have to choose for themselves. That's where choice comes in. Like, what kind of person do I want to live, and what kind of life experiences do I want to have? So yes, it's I can't really answer that question, because I'm someone that has really let go of everything, and not everyone is willing to do that or understands why people can let go of everything, why people can leave. And sometimes people, even if you let go of people think that you don't care about them, or you don't want to be a part of their lives, or people can take that kind of choice quite personally, and think it's how you feel about them, but it's happening within you, and how you feel about yourself.
Absolutely.
And what's happening within you, and I can't explain to you why I would do such a thing, because you would maybe not make the same choice, and that's also okay for you to make a different choice.
And I think it's also when the time has come for one to go on that deeper search of meaning, of purpose, I think then nothing will really stop you from making those choices, because then you are ready, and the time has come, and you sort of like find yourself in a place where you are okay, whether society accepts you or whether they don't accept you. Sort of like becomes irrelevant, because you understand that there is a higher purpose to what it is that you have to do. I also believe that to a certain degree that we have a responsibility and an obligation to find ways of expressing African traditional forms of spirituality or spiritual practices in what we do, because for the longest time it has been suppressed. Our way of doing things, whether it is in fashion, whether it is music, how we eat, those type of things are creative, because in how we cook, using the different flavors, how we make music. And it has actually been very accepted, particularly in the Western world. I mean, we look at how artists like Beyonce have infused African elements in what they produce.
But I think it's also for them, the diaspora, people that are living, that also for them it's a search for their identity too, so I don't think it's something that we can say, oh, why would someone from the West come and use our African things. We don't understand that Africa belongs to the world as much as the world belongs to Africa. So because of the history, right? Because of the things that Africa has been through, we were taken from this land. Our ancestors were taken here from this land to those spaces. So why wouldn't they come back?
No, so my issue is not with them utilizing African forms of expression. What I'm asking is, it is easier, or it seems easier for African people who are perhaps in the Western countries to associate with their Africanness than it is for most, particularly South Africans, black South Africans. It seems as if young South Africans aspire more to be like the West than embracing the richness of our culture and traditions. So that was the contrast that I was trying to make, to say why do you think it is easier for people from the West, African people from the West, to want to express their Africanness in what they do, in how they create, than it is for young South Africans. I mean, certain types of music is still a niche, like, when black people, like the soil, you look at, I mean, various other artists who have expressed themselves in an African way. That market is still a niche in South Africa.
Yes, I think it begins with accepting self. Once we can accept ourselves, we can learn how to express ourselves in exactly what we do and who we are. So creativity is not something that happens outside of you, it's something that happens within. I think a lot of things begin within. Once we start to look for approval from the outside, that's when you will face a lot of rejection, because you are rejecting yourself.
There's that conflict within.
Yeah, because of the conflict within. So if we accept ourselves for who we are, what we are, we can begin to embrace our Africanness. We can begin to embrace in its fullness, and we won't think that it's, but because that's why I say becoming a sangoma was probably the best thing that happened to me, is because I learned who I was. I learned what it meant to be black. I learned what it meant to be African. I learned what it meant to speak my native languages. I wasn't. So it's kind of to unlearn the indoctrinations that have been put on us because of our history, to unlearn and relearn about who we are and learn about where we come from. So as a modern girl that was taken from the city to go and do my training in a forest far away from the city, far away from anything, where you have to walk to get to anywhere. You have to walk for hours and hours. And I got there and I was like, people live like this. They're strong. They are happy. They are beautiful. Therefore, I can be happy and beautiful, And I learned that how our, ancestors used to live from before we had it all, and I came to appreciate what they had. I became to appreciate myself as a black girl. I became to appreciate myself as a girl that, where the things, when I came back into the city, I wasn't so enticed by a lot of things. I wasn't impressed by a lot of things, because the basic things were enough for me. But also, when you come back and you like, oh, I've learned this side of myself, but I still have this side that likes beautiful things, like nice things, and what am I going to do? Am I going to do away with this girl that likes to be, champagne and gorgeous and wear all of? Am I going to let go? And I decided that I won't let go of. I will be whoever I am in the environment that I choose to be. I will drink my champagne in the forest. And I will eat my cheese in the forest. I will do all of those things. It didn't matter. For me, those things are not separate. I don't have to, when I'm in Sandton, be all dolled up because I'm in Sandton. I can still be barefoot in Sandton and still be like
who you are,
who I am.
And that takes me to my next question. How has being a sangoma influenced your way of styling?
it has made me consider things on a deeper level. When I style people, I consider colors differently, you know, because colors represent different things. I consider, yeah, it just made me consider things from a very more of a personal level. How to, what is the best thing to choose to touch someone in a certain way. I think when we express ourselves through how we present ourselves, we forget that we make people feel a certain way when they see us, right? We make people feel a certain way. So I think I've considered feeling a lot more. How is this person feeling when they put on a certain outfit or when they put on a certain thing? And it's made me actually go back to considering craft a lot more, and work in a yeah. So I work a lot more with beadwork. You know, I work a lot more with handwork. So things that people have, you know, when I studied couture, fashion design through coutures, and that was, we did a lot of handwork. So we learned that the garment, skeleton of a garment is, you know, achieved in the first week, and then you'd spend the next 3 months working on fleshing the garment out. So it took me back to that, you know. So like I was saying earlier, that the things that you learn before you go through the initiation are not necessarily things to discard, but the things to bring on the journey.
How to integrate the things that we've learned, you know, to create ourselves, because I feel
the evolution
absolutely
must happen. You know, the evolution you must grow,
and nothing is ever lost,
and nothing is ever lost, and nothing is ever for nothing, and it's all part of the puzzle that makes you who you are. Yeah.
And you know, just taking us back to how, particularly in the creative space, and the understanding, I think, of older people of being a creative, has it been, how has expressing yourself as a creative, especially when you started, you know, from a monetary perspective, because usually parents have got expectations, right?
Yeah.
And now with you were not only getting into this space that maybe is not understood a lot, and then on top of that become a sangoma. I mean, being a sangoma is perceived, you know, in a sense that, you know, you're not going to work, or you're not going to be able to sustain a life and all of that. So you were doing both too, being a creative and being a sangoma.
I threw my entire life away. I was definitely the child that threw their life in the toilet, you know, and threw away all the expectations of me becoming something, you know, or even to have something. I have not made a huge monetary success with the things that I have chosen to do. So that has not sat well, you know, and that has not been supported either. So I think, as you know, as a black community, we have to give our children more support when they choose. The artists are the people I think need the most support, because they are the ones that are the bravest. They are the ones that choose things that aren't really meant to be chosen. They are the ones that suffer the most, because it doesn't translate immediately. You have to go through a lot of self-discovery before you have that moment, even people that are perceived to be really successful, right, also have challenges of how they got there, have that story of even keep it there is still a challenge in that success. It's even to, and we might have the wrong side of the story, right? And we don't know how the sacrifices that one has to make to achieve that level, a certain level of success, or the sacrifices one has to make to not achieve that level of success.
But maintain who you are.
But to still maintain who you are. So that goes back to value and worth. What are the things that you put your values and your worth in? Are you still accepting yourself even when society deems you not worthy? Are you still accepting yourself even when society says that what you're doing is wrong, or when it's unusual or whatever? Are you still happy with walking down
the narrow path,
the road less traveled, and I think people should see how that is an act of bravery in itself, and not an act of rebellion, not an act of rebellion. I can't find the other word, of nonsense or whatever they might say. That you are still worthy of the completeness, humanity that you deserve. You are not less than. You are not, downtrodden. You are not too. Those are the people that need our love the most, I think.
And will we be seeing more of the symbolism around ubungoma in your work?
Definitely, because I think we have a lot to teach as healers, so people can open up and come see us in our private spaces. So for me, I want to utilize my work as the educational platform. So there'll definitely be even more expressive work outside of fashion, I think, to even go express myself fully as an artist, not to just limit myself and say I am a fashion stylist. I think I've reached, I can say maybe a roofing where it's time for me to now evolve. It's time for me to now go deeper within myself to bring out more of the work. So you'll realize in the last couple of, time, I haven't really put out a lot of work. So because the work that I want to put out it has to be more considered. I don't want to make work because of the sake of making it, or because I have to in order to survive. I've learned that I can survive as a sangoma. That's the thing that puts bread on my table. My work as a healer is what I've come here to do, to survive with the people. So my work as an artist will be more, that's going to be more pure. Not that I'm not pure as a healer, but that
it will not be for the money.
It will not be for the money, no. I don't think I've ever done anything for money. I've never, even in the early part of my career, I used to work for free. And didn't tell my parents that I wasn't getting paid. And used to just ask them for money. And they got tired of that.
Yeah.
But I just was happy to be there, and I wanted to learn to be there. And then eventually the working for free thing became something that I was like, okay, cool, now I can actually I learned what the value of
your work
my work was.
Thank you so much, Noentla, for spending time with us today. I really hope that you will continue to be inspired to show up in all your fullness, to express yourself in your wholeness, in everything that you do, in all your work, and I hope that others can also draw inspiration from what you do. Thank you very much, and I wish you all of the best in your new adventures.
Thank you so much, Mabato. It's been a joy talking to you, and it's been a pleasure spending my time and sharing my stories with you. Thank you.